When I was in high school, I began to dream about becoming a missionary bush pilot. My dream was to work with Missionary Aviation Fellowship, various places that people haven't been before, to bring the gospel of Jesus to those areas. You had to have a certain amount of Bible teaching, so I began that journey at Northwestern University, and it turned out the only classes that were open at the time were ministerial classes, were pastoral classes. And I thought, I'm never going to be a pastor. I really not sure about taking those classes, but that was the fast track to becoming a bush pilot. And now it was time to look to going to the mission field. The next thing I know, I was flying. At that time, many doors were open to become involved with Missionary Aviation Fellowship. And one by one, I began to watch those doors close. It felt like the rug was pulled out from underneath me, and I began to question the Lord and ask why this was happening, because I was sure that He wanted me to become a missionary aviation pilot. I began to talk to the chief deputy of the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, and doors just seemed to open up for me, and I thought, I don't want to be a cop. I want to be a pilot. I just prayed and I said, Lord, you've walked with me this far, and if that's where you're going, I'm going with you. Found myself in the Sheriff's Academy, and just seemed like everything I did, God had favor on. And I just loved what I was doing at the time. I felt maybe this is where God really is calling me to be, because if He wasn't, why was everything going so well for me? That was until one afternoon, a call came out of a man that was robbing a senior citizen complex with a gun, and I was the first officer on scene. I began to chase him on foot and eventually caught him, and the fight was on, and when the dust finally settled, he went to jail and I went home. But as a result of that, I sustained some major injuries. I was no longer able to be a police officer. Once again, it was as if the rug was pulled out from underneath me, and this time I come crashing to the ground. I was confused, and I wasn't sure what was going on and why this was happening, because after all, if this wasn't what God called me to, why was I doing so well? And I didn't understand. And it was a point in time that, as a result of the injury, I was in bed flat on my back. I remember laying there one day, and I remember it was as if God was speaking to me. Speaking to my heart. And it was as if He was saying, calling me to enter into ministry as a pastor. And to be honest, that scared me to death. And I prayed and I said, Lord, there's no way I can't be a pastor. I don't know how to be a pastor. I don't have training to be a pastor. And I began to remember those classes that were open, the only classes that were open, and they were the exact classes that I needed. I just remember saying, Lord, I'm scared, but if this is where you're going, I'm going with you, because I'm not doing this by myself. And after about a year to 2 years of physical therapy, I was working in the church, just helping the pastor out. Our sister church at the time was without their pastor, and he asked me to to go to preach the next Sunday. I said, Pastor, I could go to help somebody, but I don't know if I want to go and actually preach. He said, take the education that God has given you and you use it. And that really struck home with me. And so I went to the church, and that Sunday they asked if I would come back the next week, and I did. And the next week they did the same thing. And after about 3 or 4 weeks, they asked if my family was interested in becoming the permanent pastor of that church. And we wanted to go where God was going, and where the Lord was going, that's where we wanted to be. He has allowed me to encourage so many people, and that their story's not done yet. That God's still in the business of making incredible things.